Welcome, everyone. My name is John DiGaetano. I'm with the San Francisco Small Business Development Center. I'm a certified business advisor and want to welcome you to our webinar. This particular subject we will be talking about is writing a successful business plan. So we're going to go ahead and get started here. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So writing a successful business plan, you can probably imagine that it's a daunting task. You're thinking, well, gee, I need to write. And a lot of people get a little confused as to exactly what it is. So what I'm going to give you is an overview, some planning and research, and some essentials that you need for a business plan. For example, I've been an advisor for many, many years. My background is in banking and financial analysis and sales and marketing. And I run into this all the time where people run into a roadblock one place or another. This particular webinar is to help you understand what those specifics are and how to get through them and how important it is. So we are going to move ahead here. So let's go here. Hold on a second. There we go. All right, there we go. So we're going to start with planning and research, some organizational matters, some marketing and analysis, financial overview of things, and I won't get in too much detail, but I'll at least give you the basics there. Some budgets and assumptions, same thing there, financial statements, and really what you kind of need as far as that is managing growth and then financing your business. So there are other webinars too that involve financing your business. So I invite you to look for that too as well, access to capital and a few other things. So you're probably asking, what exactly do I have to cover in a business plan? Well, here they are right here in a nutshell. And we're going to get into each one of these in a little bit more detail. So business summary, ideas, and overview. And this is really starting where you think you have a concept, you think you have an idea, and you want to turn it into maybe a business, okay? And then we talk about business name, executive summary, things generally speaking about what the business would entail and what your business model might be. And then your mission statement, your goals, your objectives, things that really what you want to accomplish, what's important to you in this business. Okay, and then we get into the nitty-gritty about your organizational matters like legal structure, permits, and licenses, and then insurance, those type of things that have to be covered with both the city, county, and state. So those are important factors. And then there's organizational stuff as operations, facility and location, how important that is to have and be able to secure, and then equipment if those are what you need based on your type of business, and then the management and personnel side of it all, and that can get crazy to think about as well. The next is your marketing plan, and there's a couple of sections there for your product and service, and then trying to understand where the research should go, identifying your target market, those kind of things, and then your pricing and trending, and I'll give you some pointers on that. And then exactly implementing, is exactly identifying your target market and then creating a marketing plan. And then from that result, creating a budget as well. So then a financial plan, and most people kind of balk on this, and this is probably the most important part of the business plan, is projecting your revenue and expenses and so on, so that you could move forward with exactly how you plan on running your business, and that you are able to run it smoothly without any kind of cash flow issues. And then we get into the appendix, the timetable, key context, your resume, sample of market analysis and planning, and then other materials and concepts, and maybe a lease agreement and so on. That part really, is that all that important in the business plan? Well, it really depends on your type of business, actually, what you would include in that area. So, any questions so far? And if you do, just go ahead and type it in, and I'll be happy to answer it. So there's no crazy question, no silly question. I'm happy to answer all your questions, okay? So we're going to move on right here with your executive summary. Now, usually this is towards the end of the business plan, but I like to start with it first, because really what happens is that you decide what you really want to do, and you come up with the summary. And by the time you finish the rest of your business plan, most likely this executive summary is going to change. I've seen that happen time and time again. But no worries, you can decide to do it now or do it towards the end of your business plan, but really this gives you the overall look. And this is what it includes. Really, it's a brief outline of your company's purpose and goals. And it can be tough to fit in a page or two, but a good summary includes these things: a brief description of product and service, a summary of objectives, a solid description of the market, and then justification for viability. In other words, are you really going to be able to make it in the marketplace with this particular business? And it's also based on competition and your advantage, your competitive advantage. For example, if you're opening up a sandwich shop and right across the street there's another sandwich shop, there's competition directly very close by, but then there's also, that kind of their market share, you're kind of sharing that market there. You have to have a competitive advantage for those people to actually walk across the street and come and see you instead. And then there's a snapshot of the goal and your growth potential, I mean to say. So a snapshot of growth could mean that from your studies, that growth you can maybe increase growth by 20% per year, maybe for the first 5 years. Let's just say it's that. Or it might be 10%, or maybe it's not necessarily as aggressive as that. So at least you're looking at what the industry might allow, and in your research, you'll be able to talk about that in your summary. And then an overview of funding requirements, what you need to get it through to get started. For example, you might need some equipment, or you might need to do a build out, or you might have to finish a few courses here, or get some kind of licensing, or get your business entity finalized. Those all cost some money to do. So we have to understand whether there is some personal funds that are going to be put towards this, or maybe you're going to request a loan through a bank or an alternative lender or an investor or something like that. Okay. All right then. So we're going to move on. So let's just give you a review. This on the executive summary is really a brief description of products and services, a summary of objectives, a solid description of the market. And that means, I just want to make sure I touch on this real quickly, it's a description of the market, exactly what you plan on doing. So this takes some research. A justification for viability, which includes your competition and your competitive advantage, a snapshot of growth potential, and an overview of funding requirements, okay? And like I mentioned before, we get into these things in greater detail later on in the business plan, but this basically gives the reader a summary. And those readers are possibly an investor, possibly a bank or a landlord or a family member, or maybe it might be your customer too that might be interested in exactly where you're going with your business, okay? Next one is your mission statement. And if you remember from the movie Mission Impossible, your mission, if you choose to accept it, is this. And that's exactly what it is. A mission statement really is the best example, will be defined in a company, will define your company and its purpose in about 30 seconds or less. So it's not necessarily an elevator speech, but it really is a compact paragraph that is full of meaning, okay? So you have to choose your words wisely, and this might be good. You create a mission statement, you create that statement, and keep on looking at it, read it over, take out those fluff words or empty phrases, and just make sure it gets right to the point. And a lot of times it's really worthwhile. I'll give you an example. Many years ago, I had a client that said, well, my mission statement is I make cookies. And I said, well, that's not necessarily a mission statement. So it's something that's really gonna define your company really in a short amount of time, but it's filled with meaning. So finally, this was a class that she was taking. So finally, after a couple of days in the class, she said, I got it. I finally have a mission statement, and it is, I make cookies the way your mom used to if your mom had the time. And I thought, well, that's an unusual statement, but it's full of meaning, because we all remember when we were younger about mom making cookies and how good they were, and it's all the best ingredients, and we can really identify with that. So there was some impact there was some meaning, and there was some value. So it's a challenge to capture what you want to do for your company and what it stands for, but in a brief and memorable way is what you need to really cover in a mission statement. Okay. So far, no questions, so I'm just going to keep on moving on. So developing a mission statement, start with a market-defining story. Define how your customer's life is better because your business exists. Consider what your business does for employees. And add what the business does for its owners. So this gives some value to the reader, and they can understand you a lot better in just a short amount of time. And discuss, review, get opinions, and revise as needed. Mission statements are one of those things where you might write it over and over again until you finally think it's right. And you might want to look up some mission statements for Starbucks, CarMax, Amazon, those kind of large companies, and see exactly what is their mission statement and how do they really bring it out to the customer for the customer to really understand what they plan on doing. So there we go. Okay, so in review for a mission statement and objectives, company and its purpose in about 30 seconds or less, a paragraph filled with meaning and impact, be specific to your industry and what your company stands for, and by all means, be memorable, okay? All right, so we're gonna move on to legal structure, permits, licenses, and insurance. Kind of a big subject here with legal structure and permits and licenses, but these are the three things that you really do need to make sure you're up and running and you're actually in the right space, both in the county and city and so on. And then you're protecting yourself as well. So let's start here. There's the easiest way to start a business is being a sole proprietor, which is the most basic type of business to establish. And you're alone, you own the company, it's all you, you're responsible for it's all of its assets and liabilities. That's really it. Simplest thing you can do. You can go to the county and file a fictitious name statement and get your investment to what you need for your business, and you're up and running. However, you're responsible for all the assets and liabilities. So in other words, your personal assets are at stake. In other words, there's some exposure there. So a limited liability company is an LLC designed to provide limited liability features, in most cases, for a corporation. And there are some tax advantages and operational flexibility if you also are working with a partner. So that, in most cases, protects your personal assets. So a limited liability is a separate entity aside from your personal checking account, your personal residence, and other things that you own. So it's a separate entity, as if it's a whole nother person. Okay. Okay. So a cooperative is people that form a cooperative to meet a collective need or provide a service that benefits all the member owners. For example, sometimes you'll see a grocery store that is a cooperative. So sometimes their members will work in the grocery store or work part-time to provide a service for the community, and it's all geared together. Don't see too many of those here, but there are cooperatives out there. The next is a corporation, which is more flexible and generally suggested for larger established companies with multiple employees. So usually there's a lot of employees that are involved here, and it's for tax purposes, you're taxed on the corporate side, and then the employees are taxed on the personal side as well. But like I mentioned, this is usually put together by an attorney, and for your setup for a corporation, it's advisable to you for an attorney to review this. Okay. Next is a partnership, which there's several different types of partnerships, which depend on the nature of the arrangement. And it's really what are the responsibilities for everyone within the business. And this is worthwhile to put together a partnership agreement. It's also advisable to have an attorney look at this as well, because there's some ins and outs here. Who's going to be taking responsibility of both the assets and the liabilities. So there you go for partnership. And now there's S corporation. S corporation is similar to a C corp. If you file for an LLC, you would be filing your taxes under an S corp in most cases. And what's good about that, there's some advantages to be filing as an S corp under an LLC as opposed to a C corp. Because there's, like I said, tax advantages or taxation requirements for each one of those, and the S corp is more to it an advantage of an individual. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay. I'm going to move on. So here it is in a nutshell for legal structure, permits, and licenses. I'm going to talk a little bit more about insurance in just a minute. So in review, choose the legal structure that is right for your business. Research permit and licensing requirements for your type of business and location. I'll give you some websites here in a minute here. Then discuss insurance with the provider and coverage for your product and service. And for insurance purposes, it's good to make sure you either have product liability or liability in general, or it may be also other types of insurance. It might be loss of use or interruption, business interruption insurance, and so on. So I think the best place to start for insurance is to talk to your car insurance agent and say, hey, this is what I'm doing. Can you recommend me to someone that you know that can help me with this? So we have a question coming in here. Can you go into more detail about what you mean by a solid, sorry, hold on a second, can't read it. By a solid description of the market. Okay, so a solid description of the market is understanding, is the market, what exactly is it? Is it a growing market? Is it a diversified market? Is it very, very scarce in your area? Is it something that you can rely on consistently? Is it volatile? Okay, so there's those type of things that you need to research. You could look at Google Trending to see where the market stands on a particular subject, or you can research market for this type of product or service and see what you come up with. Utilize that research into your business plan and show some information that you gathered from that information. Okay, I hope that answers your question. Okay. Okay, so also what you could do is also tap into the sftreasurer.org for permits and licenses and find out exactly what you need for a particular type of business. There's one in Sonoma County too as well. It's sonomacounty.ca.gov for business services, and that's listed in your handout there. And then there's an interesting one that is at the bottom of your screen there, or in your handout as well, calgold.ca.gov. When you look for that site, you can type in your type of business or general category, and then your zip code, and out will come out your, from the results, it will show you exactly what you need for your type of business, and that would be for permits and licenses for your particular area. So it's really a worthwhile website, calgold.ca.gov. Okay, questions, anyone? Okay, going to move on now. Okay, let's talk about facility, location, equipment, and management a bit. So, hold on a second. There we go. There we go. Okay. So this gives you an idea of what you need for equipment and managing your business to start with, and what you need for a facility. So if you can see that little spreadsheet there, it shows source of funds and shows the amount of money that you're putting into the business. Okay, I'm getting a question real quick. I'll answer this. Where do I get the handout? The handout is you should have gotten it before the class. If you didn't, you can request that through our facilitator. I think Jacques has that, and you'll be able to grab that, or he will send it to you. Okay. Okay, so source of funds. We need to know exactly where the funds are coming from, but before we even think about that, we need to know the use of the funds. So for your facility or location, you might need a building, you might need to spend money on the building, or you might need to do some improvements, or you need some type of equipment, administration expenses, opening inventory. If you see the list there, advertising, promotional, other expenses, and so on. This gives you a list and gives you an example of the type of things that you might need to get your business open. So here in this particular case, it's showing $363,000 that you need for your funding to start up the business. And then on the top, it shows the use of funds. So in this case, the owner is going to be investing about $174,000, going to work on a bank loan for $189,000, and that will get them to what they need. However, this does not necessarily cover some of the administrative expenses like operations. There are some expenses here. $14,000 doesn't sound like a lot to me in this example, but really you need to have between 3 and 18 months worth of operational expenses that you can tap into. Now, 18 months sounds like a long time. It really depends on the business. When you work within a business advisor with the SBDC, usually they will make a recommendation within those parameters. Sometimes you can accomplish everything you need within 3 months. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time if you have some kind of intellectual property or a creative online app or some kind of technology that might require some funding for operations before you even make a dime, and it may take you a long time to get that rolled out. So the first of the documents is the list of resources, like I mentioned, building machinery and so on, and then what you need to open or expand the business. And also in your part of the plan here, you also need to explain what the costs, how these costs will be used, and your resources, and how you'll be financed, like I mentioned. There's also bank loans where I mentioned there, but there's also alternative lenders too as well. And that's another subject for another webinar, which is coming up, and you should be able to look for that, access to capital. So, okay. Any questions on this so far? So as far as management is trying to understand exactly how many people do you need to work with you in getting the business up and running. So this is kind of a difficult question to answer on your business plan, but at least you're starting out with you, and you need to know whether you need an extra person or 2 or 3 to get things rolling. So you actually have to kind of visualize yourself, picture yourself in the business, and understand exactly what you'll be doing. You may have to work on the operational side, and there might be someone else that's in manufacturing. There might be someone in sales instead. So in other words, there might be a few other hats here. So, so there we go on that. Guys, I'm just going to click out of this question here. So hold on a second. Okay. All right. We move forward here. So here's the management summary. It gives you an example. For example, in this case, there's 3 managers for Eldorado Stone Company. And there will be a general operational manager, their name, who has impeccable credentials previously in the industry, has a profile and history, and so you kind of list those type of individuals. And this will benefit our company in three ways. Clients will be brought in from existing professional relationships, respect and recognized by associate organizations and state departments, and then the experience of each will attract new clients and so on. So this gives you a general idea of a management summary. And then you also might mention that you have some training managers, and which will consist of a program manager and a contractor from within the industry, and give a reason why you want these particular individuals as part of your team. Of course, you also have to list what this expense might be for these particular managers and employees too as well, because that will dip into your equipment costs, or well, in your list of management team, along with your equipment and other needs that you need to get the business rolling. And that might be down the line as well. So it may take you some time to bring on these particular individuals, but at least you're showing this planning in your business plan. So if you are showing this, it kind of impresses the reader to understand where you're going, where you are now, and where you plan on moving forward to, where and when. Okay? All right, let's move on. Okay, so in review, detail the investment needed to start or expand the business. List what resources, for example, building, machinery, equipment, and what you'll need. Explain how these costs will be used and be financed, and then create a management and personnel summary. All right, so we're going to move on. Okay, product service description, market research, target market, and competitive analysis. So let's talk a little bit more about this. Target market and competitive analysis. What do you include in this? So the industry description and outlook. So describe your industry, its current size, the historic growth, and other trends and characteristics. And you're probably going to ask, well, how do you find this stuff? There's lots of stuff on the internet. If you Google and research current size of a particular industry, the historic growth rate, like I said, trends is for like Google Trends or other characteristics. If you really just type in your particular type of business with historic growth rate, you might see some information on that. And then also, you need to rely on your SBDC advisor to help you with this too, to, in other words, guide you through this analysis, so you can put in the most important aspects of this industry description and outlook. So next, list the major consumer groups within your industry as well. It might be a demographic list of consumers, or it might be age groups, and so on. So we got a question coming in. Do you recommend, sorry guys, because my answer thing is a little bit off the page here. So do you recommend any specific resources to use for a market analysis that could possibly be accessed for a local library? Yes, I can. There are, if you go to the reference section of the library, you should be able to find some market analysis in there within their business section. There's also something that's very interesting too as well. We also have, the SBDC has access to firstresearch.com, so that'll give you some information too. And this we provide for free, so just so that you understand. There's also a reference book in the library called the Thomas Register. The Thomas Register is a gigantic phone book size reference book that tells you exactly where to find different things. In other words, if you're a manufacturer and you're making cufflinks, you might want to know how to get those little things that fit on the other side of your cuff, or just the boxes for that, or the plastic cover that would hold the cufflink. Those type of things will be in a Thomas Register. So to give you an idea of that. All right. So as far as, thanks for your questions. So hold on a second. All right. Okay, so we'll move on here. So look for those historic growth rates and trends and characteristics, and then make sure you list the major consumer groups within your industry. So the information about your target market, kind of narrow this down to target market to a manageable size. A lot of times clients will say, oh, gee, my target market is the United States or the world. And really, that's not being realistic. You need to be able to manage it into maybe a county, a couple of counties. It might be Northern California, Southern California. Many businesses make this mistake by trying to appeal to too many target markets. Also, at the same time, what you're doing with a target market is really assessing the needs and value of your product or service to be able to roll out to other markets. If you notice that Burger King will test market a particular sandwich for a brief amount of time and then roll it out maybe, or Starbucks will do the same thing, just to get the idea and feedback of what might be overall the opinion of this particular product, or it might be a service as well. So that's much more logical to do. If I was an investor, I'd want to know that you're testing this out by managing your market size, okay? And it's okay to start small just to make sure you're on the right track. Research and include the following information. So distinguishing characteristics. So this would be for your competitive analysis. Would be, what are the critical needs of your potential customer, and are those needs being met? And that's through demographics of the group, where they're located, and the seasonal purchasing trends for the impact of the business. So I have a question coming in. When doing your industry description, do you do a general description? And what are my businesses is niche and unexplored territory within the education industry. Not sure where I'd find the research for this. Okay, so the industry description to do in general description. Yes, you can do a general description of that, but you really have to kind of dig into it. So if it's an unexplored territory, you may think it is, but usually everything I've seen that has been that a particular client wants to work with, or if it's research that needs to be done, you may have to go out to the general public and ask them about this particular type of subject if it's in the education industry. So like you're mentioning here, so that might be a way to gather some information. So when we are looking for research or working on your industry description, you might have to ask people, what do you think about this? Can I ask you a few questions? And this is kind of a normal type of thing to happen. I hope that answers your question. Okay, so the size of the primary market. So add the size of your market, what data you can include to about the annual purchases of your market makes. So what I mean by this is the size of your market. It's kind of interesting. If you look at iPhone, for example, and the cell phone industry, what the size of the industry is, and you can get an idea by just typing in what is the size of the smartphone industry, and you can see it's X amount of dollars, and then see what is the primary market for, let's say, for example, iPhone. And I'll give you an example. A lot of times when I do a class, I'll ask everyone who has an iPhone, and I'll see hands raised here, and it might be 60, 70, 80%. And I understand that that is the size of the market share of this particular product in this particular class. So we get an idea of where the market share might be, and your primary market is based on that. So for more information on this, see our market research guides for tips and free government resources that can help you to build the market profile, and there's a lot of them. The SBA also handles some of this. So the SBA.gov can help you on some research as well. Okay. Any other questions out there? Okay, we're going to move on. Okay, so in review, give complete details of your product or service, illustrate your industry outlook and market knowledge, supply information about your target market and size, and then list distinguishing characteristics and critical needs. Okay, and what you see over there on the right-hand side of your screen is the total market for this particular product, total available market, and then the serviceable available market, which is the lighter blue section. And then in the gray, you see your target market and then your market share, like I was mentioning, which possibly is that. If you're showing this to an investor can easily see at a glance that you have room for growth. So there's some huge potential there if you can tell them exactly where you stand within those markets. So hopefully this is helpful for you. Okay, so pricing, industry trends, marketing plan, and marketing budget and draft. Let's talk a little bit about that. Target market and comparative analysis, like I mentioned, illustrate your industry in your market, of your market, as well as the research findings and conclusions. This takes a little bit of time. You might run into a dead end, like I said, with all of this research, but remember that you are compiling a story in your business plan, and this story takes time to complete, takes time to draft, and you'll get bits and pieces of everything you need. Remember, the important part of a business plan is a roadmap for you, but it's also a living, breathing document. It's not necessarily written in stone. It can change over time. However, it's giving you like a roadmap as if you were traveling from California to Kansas, wherever you might be going. So it shows you exactly where you're going and how you're getting there. And it's over time as well. Like I said, this is important for a landlord and an attorney, an investor, a family member, a customer. All of those people want to be able to read your plan and be totally convinced that you're on the right track. Their feedback is also very important too as well. It's important to get some feedback as well before you even launch your business, before you even spend a dime, to understand, well, can I really make it in this type of business? Okay. All right. So what to include in the marketing plan? Let's talk a little bit about that. So your marketing timeline is a description or a list of your activities, actually a complete list of everything you want to do and that you can take advantage of. And there might be major opportunities to communicate with a customer, or there might be things that you absolutely hate to do, like being in front of customers and talking with them or networking. But they really are things that should happen for the business. So in your timeline, you list every single thing you can think of doing. That would be Facebook posts, press releases. It might be networking at the local chamber. It might be creating some kind of workshops, other things, whatever you think you might be able to do. And describe this type of activity, when you'll do it and how you'll do it, and whether it costs you any money. So that's what a marketing timeline is. Once you create that, you'll be able to sort it out by preference, whether it's important to you, whether it shows that you'll have some results, or if you did get results, and then be able to devote a certain amount of funding towards it. So it gives you an idea of where you stand on all of this at any point in time, and that it corresponds with your budget. A lot of things are free too nowadays. Social media, there's things that you can do which don't really cost you any money, but they may cost you some time. And then there's a learning curve on a lot of those things too as well. So then also cover your target market. So market to a manageable size, like we were saying before, but many businesses make that mistake, like I said. So trying to appeal to too many target markets can really run you into the ground. I'll give you an example why. If you're trying to appeal to too many target markets, it might spread your product or service thin. They might request other types of products from you or other types of services, and that could send you into a tailspin of either cash flow or or confusing as to exactly what you should be carrying or doing for the business. That's why it's good to manage that to a smaller size to really get the identification of where you stand business-wise. And there may be things you don't exactly want to do for your type of business. Maybe there's a certain aspect of the business that you really don't want to do. However, the public is trying to encourage you to do that. It may not necessarily be viable. It may not necessarily be profitable. So these are the type of things that you need to look at before you really launch and start with a smaller size market. So you're learning about this as you go along. Okay, so in review for pricing, industry trends, and so on, illustrate the industry market with market knowledge and research findings and conclusions. A marketing timeline, describe the list of your activities, plan, and how you'll take advantage of the major opportunities, and then cover your target marketing to a manageable size. And then a note on pricing. Pricing kind of is dictated by reputation usually. For example, if you have a great reputation in the industry, you may be able to command a higher price for whatever you're offering, your product or service. But if you're just starting out, you may have to kind of dictate towards the market and exactly what everyone else is charging for it and base it on those points there. From your target size, and like I mentioned, marketing to a manageable size, you'll get a good idea of who your competition is, what they're charging for that particular product or service, and where you stand within those guidelines. And it may not be necessarily the cheapest offering. It may not be necessarily the most expensive offering, but at least you can guide it based on feedback from potential customers or through a survey and understand where your pricing should be. Okay. Okay, I don't see any questions, so I'm going to move on. Projected revenue and expense statement, cash flow projections, break-even analysis. This is the complicated part here, so I'm going to try to explain it as best I can for you. So the financial statements, this section of your business is supported by three basic financial statements. The first one is called a balance sheet, and that shows you the firm's assets and liabilities and net worth of any point in time. And it lists all of that, including, for example, your assets would be inventory and buildings or property or equipment and so on. And your liabilities would be all of the things that you owe. For example, it might be a loan, it might be a credit card, it might be rent that's due, it might be accounts payable. So all of those type of things. That's a snapshot of where the business is, at any point in time. The next is an income statement, which is a profit loss account. And what that is, it shows your month-to-month information on how the business has been performing. So your profit and loss, exactly what it says. So it shows revenue, your revenue streams. There might be several of those. It might be your cost of goods, and it might be your expenses overall for rent, advertising, insurance, internet, those kind of things, utilities. And then it shows, after all is said and done, did you make a profit or was it a loss? So we look at that too, and it's a snapshot of the business, either on a monthly, quarterly, or yearly basis, okay? And then the cash flow statement, which shows the inflows and outflows of cash. It's caused by the activities during that period of time. So a cash flow statement starts with a certain amount of money, ends with a certain amount of money. Let's say you start with $1,000 for January, and you took in $1,000 in sales, and then your expenses were $500. Your ending cash would be $1,500 in this case. So you see what I mean? You start with that, you end with that, and then the cash flow starts at the beginning of the following month with the money you're left with at the end of the previous month. So I hope I explained that correctly. So it shows where you stand on money to support your operations. Basically, that's what it is. So when a bank looks at these three things, your balance sheet, your income statement, and cash flow statement, they want to know that you are pretty savvy on these particular reports, and that you also know where you stand at any point in time, and they understand the business a lot better. They also see if you have the propensity to repay a loan too as well. So this gives you an example. I'll give you some websites you can refer to for these particular items to help you move along on this. So break-even point, let's talk a little bit about this. Break-even point shows you where you are now, where you're going as far as sales, and how long it's going to take you to break even. So in other words, how many of those items or widgets or whatever you need to sell to break even. So there's some variable costs that we know of, just like in your everyday life. And then there's some fixed costs that you have, just like in everyday life. Well, same thing applies for business. So for you to offset those fixed and variable costs, you have to break even at some point based on your sales. So once your sales start to rise and you know that you're making a profit, there's a point where you cover all your costs. That is considered your break-even point. Okay, so you have to illustrate your total expenses, where your costs may be at any given point in time, where sales volumes should be at your break-even point, and based on market research, assumptions, and conclusions. And that's kind of an interesting thing to see where you're going and how you're going to get there and how long it's going to take. In this case, it's showing number of units sold. If you understand what that is, number of units sold, you can also look at your profit loss projections and see how long will it take you to sell those number of items. In this case, it's almost 1,500 items that you need to sell to break even. In your projections, your profit loss projections, it might show that it may take you 8 months to get to that point, let's just say. And then you'll be able to create goals for yourself. Or it may be that you'll say, well, no, I want to make sure I break even sooner than that. So you'll have to try to establish some goals for yourself to make sure you do get there. Okay? All right. This is capital stock and retained earnings. This is not really something that you need to worry about at this point in time. I'll just cover it for you. On your balance sheet, it shows assets and liabilities, and there is a breakdown of capital stock, and that's defined as the total dollars a company receives to operate the business. So that is usually equity or debt securities in the business. So that shows there on the example there, capital stock in this case is 80,000, all right? And then retained earnings. What are retained earnings? These are earnings that are preferred to the percentage of earnings not paid to individuals, but retained by the company to be reinvested. So in other words, instead of someone getting paid out for their work in the business, they retain the earnings. In this case, it shows here at $800. And then it shows that the combination of capital stock and retained earnings at $80,800. What does that show? It just shows that in this particular case that an individual or a group of individuals contributed towards the growth of the business by bringing their earnings over and not necessarily being paid out. They might take a portion of both there. They might get paid out as far as compensation, but they also might put money right back into the business to make sure it grows. Okay. Now, balance sheet actually does exactly what it does. It balances. So it balances on the asset side, and it balances on the asset, the liabilities and owner's equity side. So, and that's an example of a very, very simplified version of a balance sheet right there. Okay. Questions? Got some questions here. Let me see here. We got. Okay, Elizabeth has a question here. Let's see. What's the difference between income statement and cash flow? Income statement actually shows what you've done as far as as far as revenue and cost of goods and expenses and what your net profit is, okay? A cash flow statement shows where you stand as far as cash in the business. For example, if you've added cash to start the business or you've gotten an infusion of cash to start with, it'll show where that cash is and whether it's dwindling down or breaking down over time or whether it's increasing. So it's very similar to an income statement. However, a cash flow statement also includes the cash that might have been infused into the business. Hope that answers your question. There's another question here too. As an artist providing art workshops with a certain county, would I need permits from each city in which I host? Am I able to contract for a workshop? Or am I contracted for a workshop? I'm not exactly sure I understand what the question is here, but you have to check with your county and see exactly whether you can provide a service or a workshop in a particular area without getting a permit. In some cases you can. I can't really answer that question because I'll tell you all counties and cities for that matter are different. For example, Marin is different than Sonoma County, and Sonoma County is different than San Francisco and San Mateo. So, and then each city has their own permit requirements. So, all right. Hope that answers somewhat your question. Okay. All right, I'm just clearing those questions so I don't get bogged down on my screen there. Okay, so we're going to move on this. So in review, draft 3 basic financial statements. 1 is the balance sheet, 2 is the cash flow statement, and then 3 is the, no, it doesn't even say that there, is your profit loss statement, okay? And then illustrate a draft statement as to where your costs may be at any given point in time and where your sales volume would be at your break-even point. So that is your break-even analysis, okay? All right, and I'm gonna give you some links to creating a balance sheet and cash flow statement later on in the presentation. Financial plan, summary, financial needs, historical records, all of this stuff we're gonna cover here. Your business personal credit report summary as well. Okay, so there's 8 things you need to know about presentation of financial statements. So financial statements are really scorecards. They really kind of show where you are at any point in time. A bank wants to see this. And like I said, an investor as well. So the scorecard shows whether you are doing well or not. And it's really easy to review, okay? What financial statements to use? So these are the ones I mentioned to you, your balance sheet, your profit loss, your cash flow statement, those 3, okay? Also knowing what's behind the numbers. Even though you're presenting these numbers, you also need to be able to defend these numbers and understand those or be able to discuss those with someone who's asking. Diversity of financial reporting. So the fact that we are putting together a balance sheet, a profit loss statement, a cash flow statement, that is diversity. All of those things tell a story of some kind to the reader. Okay. Okay, the challenge of understanding financial jargon. Once you download the profit loss statement, you'll see kind of the lingo there that you need to understand. When you look at the balance sheet, you'll all understand assets, liabilities, and so on. You'll be able to see those types of terms. And those things you just need to accustom yourself to and get used to talking with people about. Once again, if you're working with an advisor, they can help you with that financial jargon as well, and overall jargon for a business. Okay, so accounting is not an art, is an art, not a science. Exactly. With accounting, it really is understanding your specific type of business and needs and what you need to document and understand whether you really are profitable. It's not really necessarily a science. There's all different types of ways to do it. However, there is some general um, practices that you probably should look at. And like I mentioned, those particular reports, pretty much every accountant will be able to generate those for you. Now, how you use them is another story. When you're looking at revenue, and we talk about revenue streams, and those are the components of your sales. In other words, it might be separate things. If you were a retail store, it might be clothing, it might be accessories, it might be toys, or it might be something else. Those are all revenue streams. How you look at that information, and based on that information, how you build assumptions on where you're going for your business is important to know. Okay. Non-financial statement information. Your demographics could change. Your client base could change. The spirit of the industry might change as well. Look at bookstores. Many years ago, bookstores were alive and well and doing fine, but here came the recession and bookstores went down the tubes here. But also the industry changed um, with Amazon coming on board with their ebooks, and there are also books online and so on. So that changed that particular industry, and industries change can change quite drastically. Look how the car industry is kind of changing a little bit here. They're starting to move more towards electric products and technology, and a lot different than it was 20 years ago. Uh, Financial ratios and indicators. Um, your ratios are good to know. In other words, percentage of sales, what your cost of goods are uh, with your percentage of sales, what your rent is to percentage of sales, and these type of indicators will kind of give you an example of where you stand today versus where you might have been last year or 2 years ago. For example, if rent is 8% of your sales, and um, 2 years ago it was 12% of your sales, you can pretty much say, I'm doing a little bit better as far as sales is concerned and my cost for rent. So those are kind of important factors. If you're looking at your cost of goods, for example, what it takes to build a product or make a product, and you see that your ratios for cost of goods to sales has increased, you're going to have to kind of understand, well, why is this happening and can I afford it? And then those indicators will give you an example of what you need to do. And it may mean changing your type of operation, or it also might be the change in the industry or consumer habits, something like that we just kind of need to understand. Okay, so those are pretty much it in a nutshell. So in an investor's eyes, what might be the potential concerns? And this is something that you need to ask for yourself. And really, if they have concerns, you have to try to address those in your presentation, in your business plan. It may be sales, it may be cost of goods, it may be personnel, it may be marketing. Those may be concerning to anyone who's reading your business plan. It may be all of those. So there's usually some red flags that you'll come up with, so you'll have to tweak your business plan, maybe do a little bit more research. But I tell you, the research side of writing your business plan is most important. We have a question coming in. You have to excuse me because I usually have to change my glasses to be able to read these things. So, can you review non-financial statement? How an industry has changed? What can be shown through a financial statement? So, non-financial statements are things of, yes, exactly that, how an industry has changed, what might be different now versus 20 years ago. For example, Amazon started about 20 years ago, Google started 20 years ago, and then, for example, give you an example, Apple had the Lisa computer or the iMac 20 years ago, and now things have changed. And they would never be able to sell something similar to those type of products nowadays, considering the advancements in technology. So that's how things have changed. Um, uh, and so that really, it says that can't be shown through a financial statement. No, it can't be. So those are non-financial statements. Right. Did I answer that? I think so. If I didn't, let me know. I'll give you a little bit more information. All right. All right. So I'm going to move on here. Okay, so this gives you an example of a startup schedule. And if you're able to see this on the screen, it's a little bit small on your handout. So have a look at this here. Okay, so your one-time startup cost might be a rent deposit, furniture and fixtures, might be equipment, might be advertising, promotion, it might be starting inventory, software, consulting, any type of these things, and you list the amount. This is a simple Excel spreadsheet that you can devise for yourself using this template. It gives you a real good example of what you really need for startup, okay? And then you have your monthly expenses, for example, your bank charges, your debt service, whether you have a loan or not, membership dues, all these other things. This gives you a monthly expenses statement too as well. And then if you see at the bottom, it says number of months required to cover expenses. So based on your working capital and so on. So this is a good example of what to use to to uh, to get an idea of how much money you do need, what's it all going to cost. There's a lot of variables on furniture and fixtures. There's a lot of variables on build out and renovations. Inventory, you might have to, start out with a small amount of inventory. Once again, remember that target market, if you're working on a smaller market size, you'll be able to handle that, and you won't overbuy. You'll be able to research the market and so on, and then get a good idea of what you need on that. Your other expenses, like your monthly expenses, that pretty much those are fixed, and it gives you an overall idea of what might be happening for you on a monthly basis. And some of this might be overwhelming for you, but like I said, try to take some baby steps here. You may not necessarily be hiring anybody overall to begin with. It may be just you, or it may be a small staff to begin with. Um, and so, like I said, researching these items, talking to people, understanding where you stand on money is would be very helpful for you. Okay, so here's the startup cost spreadsheet. This is the website to go to. This is a score.org website that includes startup expenses. And then there's also a financial projection spreadsheet, which you'll be able to use. And this is also listed right there. It's score.org resource/financials projection template. So you see the exact um, website address right there. And you'll be able to download these and utilize them. They're Excel spreadsheets that will help you. Okay. Questions so far? Anything else? All right. I'm going to move on. This is also on your handout. Okay, so in review, draft a presentation that covers the 8 things you need to know about financial statements. Create a startup cost spreadsheet utilizing the template that you see there to the right of the screen. Draft assumptions as to where sales, costs, and cash flow may be with projections spreadsheet, with your projection spreadsheet and utilizing the template. And then if financing is required, inquire into your business credit history, your business and personal credit history, I mean to say, to understand where you stand on that. For example, if your credit score is 500 or 600, you may want to, try to get that in better standing before you even approach a financial institution or an alternative lender on that. So that's something to think about too. There's a couple of free services that can give you a credit score without getting a hit on that. So, and you should be able to find it online for free. Okay. All right. Going to move on. So here's a business plan checklist. This is just basically what we covered. This is not on your handout. So you might want to, if you're on a computer, is to take a picture of the screen. Okay. But pretty much it's covered in our package here. But this is all of it in a nutshell. If you're on a phone, you can probably take a picture of the screen as well. So we'll have a look at this here, and I'll wait for questions if anyone has any. So here is, just like I mentioned, executive summary, business description, marketing, research, design and development, manufacturing operations, your organization, your critical risks, your financials, and your milestone schedule, and your appendix. So, okay. I see a question coming in. I'm getting a question, will a recording of this video be available? Yes, absolutely. And we're going to be sending out the link for you, okay? So if need be. And then there'll also be a lot of our future webinars too, for you to be able to look at. No. Okay. I have another question coming in that said, do you recommend going through these questions first? Well, yes, I guess you can look at these questions as well. If you can answer most of these questions, then I think it's your best bet to get your business plan rolling. There may be some questions that don't apply to you, for example, manufacturing and operations, if you're a service-oriented business. But for the most part, you should be able to answer these questions. And if you have more of a detail on this, you can certainly include it into your business plan. Okay, hope that answers what you were looking for. Okay, so the sample plan of a finished business plan, if you plan, you have the opportunity to elaborate the ideas that you feel are most integral to your business. So what I mean by that is that your business plan is an opportunity to tell the world exactly what you plan on doing and how you plan on doing it and what's so important to you. So you probably have a passion for this, and it really brings out your passion, your excitement, and so on. And the idea is to get the reader excited too as well. So if you follow this outline, you could either follow it loosely or closely as you choose. But in the sample, the executive summary, which I mentioned, is the last section of your business plan. And like I said, it's usually presented first in order to emphasize the most impressive features of the business. So you can decide where you want to put it. Most experts will say, oh, really, this should be at the end of your business plan. And some say it should be at the beginning of your business plan. In my class, I always show this first because it can change over time. When you start drafting your ideas in your executive summary, you may decide that this needs to change based on my assumptions here, and I realize I can't handle this, or this is too expensive, or that's not going to work for me. Based on my research, I need to change. And that's pretty much what happens. And that's normal. In my business plan, my next level class, this happens all the time where people decide, well, I certainly need to adjust this. Do you have resources? And this is a question that's coming in. Do you have a resource or a link for a template, for example, of income statement, cash flow balance? I just showed that. If you didn't see it, it was on the site, and I'll go back to that. There is no real template for a break-even analysis except for the graph that you see that that I showed you on the site. So I'll turn to that here in just a minute. Have another question coming in. What is the typical time frame to complete the basic simple business plan? Well, I mean, you can pretty much write a business plan in maybe in about a week or so, or maybe or two. I've seen business plans that are anywhere from 2 pages, not acceptable, to 60 pages, which is a little bit overkill. I've seen people draft business plans that have taken them months to build. Depends on how complicated your business is. I ran a class one time, and I had a couple that was starting a distillery, and they created their business plan um, based on the components of the class that I taught, and it took them several months to complete, and they completed 8 years of projections. That's a lot. Well, for a distillery, it's needed. But for a regular business, you need about 3 years of projections, basically. So you can do 5 years as well if it's really a lofty type of ambitious business. So okay. Next question is, if you have a business and you want to merge them, do you write it out as one plan, or do you write it out for each separate? Well, I guess if they're related, you can most likely merge them if it's to your benefit. It, there's a lot of times businesses will do two separate entities because they're not really related, or they might be construed as being in competition with each other. I don't know. That's kind of a mixed kind of bag on as far as the question is. It it really depends on the type of business. In my thought is, if they're very similar, that you'd probably want to merge them and be able to create an entity that offers those products or services together. But if they're totally different, then I don't know if it makes sense to put them together. Okay, hope that answers your question. I want to go back to, so hold on, everyone. To Okay, I want to go back to the resource here, which you can see that there. That is your resource for. Sorry, there we go. For your startup cost and your spreadsheet, your profit loss spreadsheet. Hopefully, you can see that, and that's through the SCORE um, website. Okay, and these are Excel spreadsheets. Sorry, I'm having trouble with my, there we go, okay. All right, let's move forward here. So that's pretty much what I have. I didn't mention that I've written a few books here, Connecting Your Business Plan to a Modern World, Creative Ways to Fund Your Small Business in Today's Economy, and How to Write a Business Plan. These are available out there, but with the help of a business advisor, you should be able to, through the SBDC, you should be able to get where you want to go and really understand everything that has to be done in creating your business plan. So are there any questions? Going to leave it open for just a few minutes for questions. Okay. I want to refer you to the sbdc.org to request consulting, so you can work one-on-one with an advisor, and this service is free. I want to mention to you that we have some great advisors that are in all aspects of business services, so they can help you anywhere from business planning to funding to marketing to working on negotiating lease to some accounting practices and so on. So it's a wonderful resource. The SBDC, the San Francisco SBDC.org has been a wonderful resource for many, many businesses, and we have lots of success stories. So Any other questions before I say we are signing off? I have another question that says, thank you. This has been very, very informative webinar. I added an extra very there, but yes, thank you so much. I appreciate that and hope this has been helpful for you. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, I hope and I encourage you to communicate with the San Francisco SBDC or your local SBDC if this is streaming online to help you with your business needs, okay? Once again, thank you so much for your help. And if there are no other questions, I'm going to be signing off then. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much.